Hi there, I'm Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez, and this is the Design Your Physician Life podcast. Welcome to this episode brought to you by our Maxillary Mastermind, an exclusive mastermind for physician entrepreneurs, and by SemiRetiredMD, where physicians can reach financial freedom faster than they think. Today, we have a very special guest precisely from SemiRetiredMD, curator along with her husband, Dr. Letizia Alto. Her husband is Dr. Kenji Asakura, and Dr. Alto joins us today to talk about entrepreneurship, real estate. They have a great website where you can find how to work with them. Dr. Alto is the co-creator of the Crash Course in Cash Flowing Rentals, Accelerating Wealth, a short-term rental blueprint, Zero to Freedom through Cash Flowing Rentals, Fast Fire Bookkeeping course, and they also have a virtual summit, Fast Fire to Freedom, as well as the blog, Rich Doc, Poor Doc. We have a great conversation with Dr. Alto about entrepreneurship and more. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Design Your Physician Life podcast, where you will get excited about being a physician, learn the tools that can help boost your success, and great tips from successful doctors. Join us to unlock the keys to an amazing physician life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Myrdalis Diaz-Ramirez.
Hello, thank you for being here. We're super excited. Today we have Letizia Alto, Dr. Alto, better known as Leti from the Leti and Kenji duo, right?
Yeah, thank you for having me.
She, along with her husband, have created Zero to Freedom course. They also created the Rich Doc, Poor Doc podcast, and they help physicians achieve financial freedom through learning by investing on multifamily homes and now short-term rentals. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So we're going to start with the basic stuff because first, more than anything, you've been a physician before you became a mom, before you became a real estate investor, right? Yep. So tell us about when you were a little girl or when you were a teenager or later on, what inspired you to be a physician? What happened there?
So my father is actually a family doc, and he worked abroad. He loved to kind of go out there and work in developing countries. And I'm sure you probably don't know this, but I grew up in Papua New Guinea for the first 7 years of my life. And actually the first few months of my life, I was on an island called Rhoda. My dad was the only doc. And then in Papua New Guinea, he actually ran the health system, the provincial health system. And so the hospital was right in my backyard. And, kind of lived in this expat community of all the docs. And we would go down there and see the patients. I remember when I was little, like 4 or 5, maybe 6, because we left when I was 7, that my dad actually took me in and watched a labor and kind of traumatized me a little bit. But we would go to the wards for Christmas and deliver our toys to other kids and, lived in the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And then he went to work at a medical school in Ponape, which is Micronesia, small little island. And so also grew up there in a whole community of physicians who were working at the medical school. And so I always had linked travel and living in exotic destinations into being a doctor. And I really wanted to do the travel and the adventure. And being a doctor seemed like a great way to be able to do what my dad had done, which I saw a lot of joy that he had from trying new things, from pushing his limits and being in uncomfortable situations, right? Going and being a director of a whole provincial health system in Papua New Guinea, in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, not even like near a city in really rural part of Papua New Guinea. And he was doing, arrow wound surgeries and things like that. And so I thought that's what I wanted to do. And I became—
So the birth of that baby didn't scare you?
No, I guess not enough, right? But I really was interested in I actually majored in anthropology in college because I thought I was going to go lead development projects in other countries and be a doctor too. And that was the best meld of both worlds. And so I was pre-med anthropology major and deferred from med school for a year to do an anthropology master's degree. And I did a 2-year program in 1 year and then went into med school. So that was my plan: go live abroad, work in developing countries, and be a family doctor like my dad.
Have you been able to heal any arrow wounds yourself?
I have not. No, I got sidelined by hospitalist medicine.
And so where's your family from?
So my family is from Central Ohio. They didn't travel or do anything when they were younger. It's just they just had a spirit of adventure, and my mom was up for whatever. And so, yeah, I grew up in rural Ohio, went to med school in like New York and residency in Massachusetts, and then they moved and they went to Thai refugee camps, and they went and they worked on St. Lucia, and they just always worked abroad from the minute my dad, kind of graduated from residency.
So that's why you can't stay still either, huh?
I think so. It definitely made me want to travel and see the world, and also know that even with kids, that it was still possible to do a lot. And I didn't have to stay in one place, because that was my childhood, was traveling.
That's awesome. So you were in Papua New Guinea first, and then when did you return to the state to study?
So my parents moved us to the United States when I was 10. We moved to Grand Junction, Colorado. So kind of desert Colorado, which is quite an adjustment from a small Pacific island. And we were there for 4 years. And then we were in Maine until I went to college. So basically the longest I ever lived anywhere was Papua New Guinea. And it was basically 6 years of my life until I guess I moved to Seattle. That was the longest I ever lived anywhere. It was 4 years.
Tell me about like your medical school, where you went to medical school, and then your residency, and how you got in, this guy that you fell in love with and now you have kids with.
So I went to medical school in Vermont. They were the ones that were willing to let me defer, which was really an amazing thing, because I said, I really want to do this master's program. I'll do it in 1 year. Will you let me defer? And they said yes. And that was a very cool thing about Vermont is there was like a lot of non-traditional students, and they were willing to think outside the box. And so they let me defer for a year. I went to University of Vermont, became, family medicine, and I was going to stay on the East Coast. I was actually previously married, and my husband worked in Washington, D.C., and I was going to stay on the East Coast, but I had a couple spots on that application list left that I could apply to for free. And I was like, I've never been to Seattle. Maybe I'll just check it out. And I was going to visit one of my friends in China. He was deferring from med school for a year, and he was working in China, like teaching English. And I was like, Seattle will be perfect on the way to China. And so I had 3 interviews in Seattle. Actually, there were three spaces on my residency application. I had 3 spaces. So I got 3 interviews. And I was like, well, I'm not going there twice. And I'm going on the way to China. So I'll just do 2. So I did the 2 Swedish medicines ones, and I was not going to go to Seattle, but I fell in love with both programs and ended up ranking them number 1 and number 2. And my ex-husband was not happy, but kind of complied and moved with me and did residency. And then I wanted to do a hospitalist fellowship, and I was doing that. And then my marriage was falling apart. And then that's how it happened. I was in the hospital. My marriage was done, and met Kenji. Actually, I had met him 4 years before. Had met him when I was a resident. He had been my teacher, and so kind of knew him. And yeah, that's the story.
Awesome. So now you're married to Kenji, and he had already, I think, some apartments, right? And
he had done a lot in before 2008, and had really suffered in the crash. And so when I met him, he had, I think, 2 condos left and a little bit of raw land left in Florida. Just things that he was so underwater on that he hadn't sold because of the crash of 2008. But he didn't have any rental condos when I first, when he and I first got together. Well, he was renting the condo at a loss. Let's put it that way. They weren't really rental condos. They were liabilities that he was holding on to.
He was giving away some, lodging to somebody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I hear anthropology, and I hear medical school, and I hear traveling and falling in love, but I don't hear like entrepreneurship. Did you ever see yourself as an entrepreneur before you read, I know the story about reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad on that wonderful trip you had to New Zealand?
No. So never. Even if you asked me 10 years ago, do you ever see yourself as a leader? I wouldn't have even said yes. I saw myself as a person who liked to put people together to do social things and have parties, but not really as a leader, and definitely never as an entrepreneur at all.
So you guys went on that trip to New Zealand, Kenny and you, and then you found this. How did you find that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Kenji had been encouraging me to read it for a while, and I don't know why. I just, took it on that trip. Well, actually, I had it on a Kindle, and I guess I just had the time to read it. And part of the story is that literally we were free camping every other day. We would camp, and you weren't supposed to do that, but you didn't have plugins, electrical plugins. And so the electricity didn't really work on our camper van unless we were plugged in at a campsite. So we didn't have it. And so I was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and blew my mind so much. I was like, hey, will you read this with me? And we read it out loud to each other. And the ideas and the planning that came out of reading that completely changed where our lives were going.
I have to confess that before meeting you, and we guys met through the Leverage and Growth Summit. That's where we met. I did the same with my husband, and it was, we read it aloud together. It's like, I saw it. I saw the videos on these guys. Like, this is crazy. What is this guy talking about? And I said, Tomas, we have to do this together. And we put it like on the TV. So we did audiobook, and then we do the exercises together. And then I thought from then on, like, this is like a must for any marriage. Like, you have to get married. You get this book, you read it together, actually before getting married. And if you don't agree, you don't get married. That should be the thing.
Yeah, that's an incredible thing, because then you're aligned on what you're doing with your future, right? And you're aligned whether or not you want to both be employees. And you may actually find that one of you does and one of you doesn't, but at least now you know that going into the marriage, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's super important that you're aligned, and then you know your weaknesses, and then how you complement or each other. So you read that, and then here you are a few years later with an emporium, right? You have built courses to teach other people what you've been able to achieve yourself in real estate. And between there and now, and comparing just side by side, like all the effort and time and all the sweat and tears that takes to be a doctor versus becoming an real estate entrepreneur. How do those two compare to you in terms of time, preparation? Is there anything that you can say relate to those two different stories that are parallel, kind of?
For me, medical school was much more difficult than learning real estate. I would say the effort, energy, focus, all of that I had to put in med school was astronomically more than real estate. Real estate just kind of made sense. And if you like hard assets, if you like things you can touch, I think that you can become very quickly very passionate about real estate. And then if you like to fix things up and make them better, that also kind of makes sense. When I think about what equivalent difficulty is to med school, I mean, I think entrepreneurship is, and not real estate entrepreneurship, but starting a business, building a team, that has taken a lot of blood, sweat, energy, tears, and just so much learning. That is equivalent to medical school in my mind. But real estate certainly is not. It's much, much easier, it really is something you can do on the side. I think that building a business of now, I think I have 16 people, is really a full-time job in a lot of ways, just like med school was.
So you have like not only one business, really, you have different businesses. You have the education business, and you have at least, and within the real estate, each one is, its own business, really, each property. Mm-hmm. So how much people you have like on the real estate part, and how much people do you have in the teaching part of it, the educational part?
Yeah. So everyone in my team works in SemiRetiredMD. So the teaching education part. Part of my team does help Kenji on the real estate side. And part of that actually informs our education. So we have one person who's helping us with managing a short-term rental in Dallas. And that informs the education piece that we're delivering as well, because she's going out and exploring different options for short-term rental tenants. Where we have a boxer in there right now filming a documentary in our house, in our short-term rental. And we're looking into other options for midterm rentals, renting it out as a movie set, renting it out in photo shoots, like all that stuff she's working on. But it informs our short-term rental course and our community as well. So everyone works for SemiRetiredMD, but people do help Kenji a little bit on his side too. But I would say, again, it's just the equivalent amount of work for real estate versus starting a business. It's not even close, because everyone is working in semi-retired.
And how did Kenji and you split your duties from the beginning? How did that evolve?
So we didn't initially split our duties. We just gravitated to what we liked. And so I was always the person looking for deals, and I really liked to negotiate. So I was kind of the negotiator. And Kenji was always the person doing all the details and making stuff happen, the executor, because he was real estate. He was the one claiming real estate professional. He's 9 years older than me, and he was happy to kind of cut back in medicine. And I was just coming out of divorce, and I really didn't want to. I wanted to kind of keep up my skills. I never wanted to rely on anyone else. And I wanted to know that I could support myself for the rest of my life myself without relying on anyone. So I wasn't willing to cut back, but he wanted to. And so he became the real estate professional. Because of that, he needed to spend the hours to be able to justify that he was meeting criteria. So he had to be involved in all the day-to-day little things that, rehabs, the overseeing all the property managers, the choosing of tile. Like I would help with some of the design stuff, but that was really the natural from the very beginning. Was real estate was primarily him, and I was primarily working for us as a hospitalist to support our real estate habit. And then when SemiRetiredMD, was running, it was kind of a half split initially. But then and partially because Kenji was just moonlighting and I was still working. I was still working as a hospitalist. We made a decision right when we were about to build our courses that I was going to run semi-retired as the CEO. And so when we made that decision, then there was actually a decision maker at each head of the company. And before that, there wasn't. And that was, I think, a weakness to not have a final decision maker. If there was a disagreement, both of us had to agree in order for something to happen. And that final decision maker mark just meant that we were able to kind of override each other if we really wanted to in terms of a major decision. And then as we've gotten busier and busier, it's been really vital for us because I don't know everything he's doing and he doesn't know everything I'm doing. And that's even become to the point that I bet he doesn't know 70% of what I do in the course business. And I probably don't know 80% of what he does in the real estate business, just because of the amount of stuff we're juggling. And so that came out of that initial decision to make one of us the CEO of each one. And that's the only way we were able to get the leverage of each other without both of us having to be present for every decision.
So in that evolution, you say that you were working at the hospital. So at which point could you have left the hospital after you starting your real estate venture? Did you decide to continue because you wanted to still continue to be a physician? Or could you have left like a year into this thing, 2 years? When did that happen?
So I could have left in the end of 2017 and we could have moved to a low cost of living place and be totally financially free. I no longer needed to work. I still had that kind of sense that I wanted to be able to support myself and I wasn't willing to stop and be a moonlighter at that point. Kenji kind of feels like, he can be a moonlighter. He can jump in. He remembers everything. Me, I really wanted to keep my finger on the pulse of things and didn't want to feel out of date and didn't want to feel like maybe I missed something. And I very much, again, wanted to know that I was reliant on myself and I could always have a backup plan. Plus, it didn't help. We needed loans, right, too. And so for loans, it was really helpful to have somebody working and have a salary to be able to get those residential loans. So I could have quit way earlier. And I remember in 2018, I had a baby in March and I had just started a new job in Hawaii in January and they wanted me to be full-time. And I wanted to kind of go down to half-time after the baby. And that wasn't an option for me. And so I ended up staying there less than a year. And the reason I really stayed there less than a year, I was like, I don't need to stay here. Like, I'm not willing to work full-time in a place that isn't willing to let me work half-time because I don't have to work. And so then I went back to Seattle to work half-time.
Well, you don't have to work because you're working on real estate.
I was choosing to work, right? And so I decided I was going to choose to work half-time and not be full-time. And so that meant moving to a different hospital and I could make that choice. So that was freedom, in 2018 to be able to say, I don't need this. I can walk away if I want to. Big deal.
How was your care to those patients when we were working half-time, knowing that you had the freedom to just, I can walk out of here at any point?
Oh, it was so great. I mean, I showed up so happy. I was like a light in the hospital. I mean, I would come hang, meet one of my colleagues on the floor, and they'd be complaining about something or, angry at somebody. And I would just like not care. I just would be like, that sucks that you're walking around this angry, but like, it's really not that important. Like, let's just move on. My whole attitude was positive. I didn't feel burnt out. I knew it was a choice. And so I just did not get involved in the politics and the day-to-day anger that I think I had felt previously when I was a full-time hospitalist, getting paged all the time, stressed out, eating in the elevators. Like, even if I had a week like that, now I knew I had 3 weeks off. And I knew it was a choice. That's the key, right? It's a choice. You can choose to leave anytime. You don't have to do it. And so my care of my patients was way better. I took the time. I showed up a very different person in a very different mood than I did before.
That's awesome. And so let's think about you both being physicians and being entrepreneurs. Do you think you have this particular characteristic as a physician that helped you or was a benefit, an advantage to become an entrepreneur?
I think decision-making is really the only advantage we have over a lot of people. But I mean, largely, I don't think there's anything special in terms of intelligence or drive or focus or anything that any other physician doesn't have. But I think one of the things we can do is we have chosen to make decisions quickly, and then we don't regret it. We just move on. We don't double guess it. And so we decided to be real estate investors, and we were all in, and we didn't double guess it. We just kept going. We knew where we were going. When we decided we were going to do it, we said, we're going to replace our clinical incomes in 7 years. And that was the focus. And we were completely both together on board. Every decision was made based on that. And we made that decision quickly, in a matter of days. We made the decision to move to Puerto Rico. That was made in a matter of like 30 minutes. And then we did it. We didn't double guess ourselves. And when we felt fear, because we still feel fear, you still feel that anxiety, right? We just kept going anyway. And we just knew we would figure it out and it would be okay. And that's probably the thing that sets us apart is we know, well, we make decisions, but we're like, we're going to figure it out. And it doesn't have to be permanent. That's the other thing. I think people, when they're thinking like, should I move to Puerto Rico or should I make this big decision? It's not always permanent. You can always change if you don't like it. And that's the thing is I think sometimes we get ourselves into a situation where we feel so much fear because we think of a decision as permanent, but it's not. You can change your mind down the road if you want to, if it's not working.
So when you made these decisions about becoming a real estate, and by the way, I love Puerto Rico, right? Being from Puerto Rico, and I love that we saw each other there. But when you made this decision, who was your coach? Who did you learn from? Did you just do it on your own? You just decided, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to read all these books, or we're going to see videos, or what happened there?
We had no coaches. We had a real estate agent that we found about 3 months into our journey who knew what she was doing. But we didn't have a lot of mindset work done at all. I had just read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, probably 6 months before. And that was like my first personal development book I ever read. So I don't know. We had each other. That's really all we needed. We didn't think each other were crazy. Everyone else around us thought we were crazy, but we didn't think we were. So that's all we needed. Definitely we would have gone faster. We would have made a lot less errors. We would have been a lot further along if we had mentors or coaches who had pointed out all the faults in our blind spots in our reasoning or where we were about to make a mistake. Certainly would have gotten there faster. I know that for sure. But we didn't have anything initially. We just didn't know what we didn't know.
So how fast did you get there? It was 7 years that you set yourself up for.
Yeah. So for fully replacing both of our clinical incomes, if you just use the cash flow, I think it took us about that long. If you use like tax savings and all that pieces, it happened way, way earlier. And then for financial freedom, like once I had over 150,000, 200,000 in cash flow, I was like, I don't need more than this. We didn't live on a lot. We didn't have, let me see, do we even have kids at that point? Yeah, we had one little kid and we didn't even have childcare at that point. We were just taking care of ourselves. And so, because Kenji was stay at home at that point, a moonlighter, he would just carry her around and work on the computer, take her to all the sites. So we didn't have a childcare. So we had very few expenses and we were house hacking too, part of that time that we had our new baby. So that was crazy. And we didn't, again, hardly had any costs at all. So we lived in a duplex. We lived upstairs and we rented out the floor below us. And so, the floor below us was paying the mortgage kind of thing. And we lived there. We rehabbed the house and then we lived there probably about 8 months and then we moved on.
So I want to move like a little bit farther from that. Because this definition has been very important for us, which is niche slapping. Mm-hmm. And it came from that $100 million offer via you to us. So if you can tell us what's important about niche slapping and how it has helped your business.
Yeah. So when we were first starting Semi-Retired, we found a sentence that was like, I help blank, do blank, and what sets me apart is blank, something like that. It was a sentence. And what we really were focused on was physicians, because we were physicians. We felt very passionate about helping physicians and we knew we could speak to physicians. That was our niche. And then we also had direct ownership real estate, which is a niche again within real estate. So our niche was so narrow. There was really some question like, is there going to be enough here for us to build a business? Build a blog? Are people even going to read, right? It's a tiny niche within a niche. But we've since learned, once we, read books like $100 million offers, which we just read recently, is just how important that niche is, because you can speak to the people. Because if you try to speak to everybody, then nobody thinks you're talking to them. But if you speak to a niche, then you can use the right words. You can speak with passion if you're passionate about that group, which we are. And then all your marketing can be focused that way. And that can make a big difference in the growth of your company. And really all you need is like 1,000 raving fans. You don't need 5 billion raving fans. You just need 1,000 people who are really into your company. And there are 1 million doctors in the country, in the US. There are many more in the world. And when you look at it that way, having a niche like physicians, plus a niche like direct ownership real estate, it's actually a fairly large group of people that you can target as your audience.
Awesome. So we reviewed all your story, not all of it, but a lot of it. And if you have physicians who want to say, you know what, I want to do this, I don't know what to do. Do you have like specific tips, 3 specific tips that you can give to physicians who feel overwhelmed with the current situation and maybe want to dive into entrepreneurship, maybe real estate or their own practice or physical digital product? What 3 tips would you give them?
So the first one is to believe you can do it. And I think sometimes to really believe, you have to see other people who are doing it. And so I would look for examples around you of other people doing it. And maybe it's me, maybe it's actually you, Myrdalis, doing entrepreneurship, going out there, putting themselves out there and making change, right? Making change in the culture of medicine, making change for physicians everywhere. So I think if you can look at others as a source of inspiration because they've done it, and it's just an example of what you can do. Just because somebody else has done it, I would encourage you not to think of it as competition or now that space is, completely filled and now I can't get into it. That's not the case at all. There's more than enough room for everyone. Different people speak to different people. Look at it as somebody else being really successful as an example of what you are able to do. And if you can use that and you can believe it's possible for you, that's the most important step to being able to do it. Number 2, I would say focus. So if you are trying to build 5 businesses at once, that's spreading your focus, and you're probably not going to do a great job at any one of them. Even when we are talking about market choice in direct ownership real estate, we always have our students initially concentrate on one market because you want to build your team. And that focus is so important to gain the mastery. And mastery comes with a lot of hours of focused effort and work. And once you gain mastery, now you have a skill you can share with others. If you're just a dabbler, you don't really have a skill to share unless you have mastery or unless you bring together masters. That's the only other way to do it, right? Is if you're the conductor and you bring together the knowledge of masters. So an example would be like Tony Robbins, right? He brings together the knowledge of all these other people, but he's a master of public speaking. So that's the part he's mastered. And then I think it's just surrounding yourself with the right community. So I truly do believe that proximity is power. So if you're around people doing different things, you have the opportunities to even do things you can never imagine. And so hanging out with other entrepreneurs will really help you to see all the options out there and see other businesses will help apply what can be done differently in your business as you're building it. And then having those like-minded individuals who are stepping out of the box and doing things differently compared to maybe everyone else around you in your family or your coworkers, that supportive community can really make the difference in helping you get to the next step. And when the challenges come, lifting you up instead of saying, see, I told you so, and helping you see solutions and move forward.
Well, I have to tell you guys that I'm here where I am because I surrounded myself with people like Letty and Kenji. Definitely. We took their course, Zero to Freedom, and it was a life-changing. I have to tell you that I haven't invested yet. However, all the things that we have been doing are some sort of version of what we learned with her in her course. And that has aligned us up that we're ready to invest right now. And we're working on that ourselves. So talking about your course, it's really been a life-changing for our family. Tell me about it. Tell me, how do you see your course? How people can reach you? First, before that, the process, how it happens so that people who are listening to this, they become more curious and they want to go and explore it.
Yeah, so we train physicians how to invest in cash flowing rentals. So these are rentals that make them money every month because that's ultimately what replaces your income. And we do this through courses. And like you mentioned in the beginning, we have a long-term rental course called Zero to Freedom and a short-term rental course called Accelerating Wealth. And both of these courses are actually online courses that are between 6 and 8 weeks long. And they are a community of people that go into the course, and they have a supportive community, a like-minded community where they share resources, they can ask questions. They have a live component with Kenji and I coming in and answering Q&As. And Zero to Freedom also has coaching components. So previous students who've gone through, they built portfolios, they come in and they coach. So that really adds that extra level of community. And the idea with Zero to Freedom is to go from knowing nothing about real estate all the way through buying your first property. And Accelerating Wealth is about buying short-term rentals and building the business of short-term rental and hospitality and self-management and all that stuff that are the finer details of short-term rentals, which really aren't covered in Zero to Freedom. And we are at SemiRetiredMD.com. And so you can find out about all our courses there. They're only released a couple times a year. And so you have to kind of get into the cohort, but there are wait lists you can join ahead of time to get into them. And that's the easiest way to find me is SemiRetiredMD, or join one of our Facebook groups, Semi-Retired Physicians or Semi-Retired Professionals, which are for high income professionals like lawyers who aren't necessarily physicians.
So we're so happy that you were with us today. Any final thoughts you might have for our listeners, our future or current physician entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, I think physicians are just so well situated to be excellent entrepreneurs. We are focused. We are not afraid of hard work. We're very creative. We're always looking for all the potential possibilities, right? Like a differential diagnosis. You're trained to look at all the potentials out there. You're smart and you're used to, that kind of perseverance that it takes to go through med school. So I think physicians are incredible entrepreneurs. We just have to get out of our own way in terms of our fears and our risk averseness, because in order to do anything big, you do have to take some risk. Now you can take smart risk, but you do have to take some risk to put yourself out there, whether or not it's doing a podcast, leading a mastermind like you do. You have some fear putting yourself out there, but if you don't take that risk, you can't change other people's lives. And that's what it's all about, is transformation of other people's lives. And the joy that comes from seeing people experience that pays you back 1,000,000 times over when you're helping others do it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, Letty,
Thank you
for being here.
me.
It's a pleasure. You guys have truly made a great, serious contribution to our physicians in our communities who might feel overwhelmed, lost, to find that there's possibilities, that there's other things that we can do. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. And it's just a pleasure to get to talk to you again and see you.
Well, guys, that's it for today. Stay tuned for more of our Design Your Physician Life podcast, which was brought to you today by our Maxillary Mastermind, an exclusive mastermind for physician entrepreneurs, and SemiRetiredMD.com. Please don't forget to visit their website, SemiRetiredMD.com, to learn more about their courses, especially the newest course, Accelerating Wealth, Short-Term Rental Blueprint. We will continue to bring you useful resources to develop your physician entrepreneur life like we did today with Dr. Alto, and much more. Thank you for joining us. We hope you had a great time like we did. Stay in touch with us. Visit our website, www.maxallure.com. That is MAXALLURE. And please don't forget to subscribe, like us, give us 5 stars, and share the love. Share with your friends and family. See you later. Thanks. Bye.
Please remember that Design is not providing specific financial, medical, or career advice. Our only intent is to stimulate your appetite for growth by sharing our experience and those of our speakers, coaches, and guests. Your personal growth and success will be unique to your circumstances and your hard work. We sincerely hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to seeing you next week.